Top Med Talk.
Nick Majerison here. Welcome to a very special edition of Desiree Chappell's Roundtable. Originally streamed live on topmedtalk.com under the title Educational Dinner Symposium Q&A Session. This standalone piece explores some of the issues raised by Top Med Talks 2, Rick Dutton. If you missed that, go to topmedtalk.com and you'll find a link in the show notes, alongside all of the contributors and questioners you're about to hear. It's presented by Monty Mython and Desiree Chappell with Rick Dutton, Chief Quality Officer at United States Anesthesia Partners, Baltimore.
So I think you started relatively recently. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Jamie Harris, and I'm from Tulsa, Oklahoma. And it is new at our hospital. I think one thing that's just kind of been a challenge is change for our group, our anesthesia group. Like how you get the whole team on board and implement this.
Yeah. What do you think, Rick?
Well,
what is the magic bullet to change management in getting that?
Ultimately, the big answer is you want to build a culture in the group of being open to change, right? That we will adopt new things as they come along. We'll build them into their practice. We'll look at what works. We'll keep the good stuff and let the bad stuff go. Getting that started, it's really a very incremental process. Start with small changes, phrase them as pilots or temporary or experiments, and start with the most receptive people you have. So typically the enhanced recovery protocols we have are built around a typically young, enthusiastic surgeon champion. We find a young, enthusiastic anesthesia champion to put with them to get it rolling.
So Sabri, I had been doing it for a while, along with Tony Sinigor back in the back.
We were going to go to Tim next, and I'll come to Tony.
A comment and a question. I guess the comment is about the walk the walk and the talking the talk. I mean, I would love to say that we could drop ERAS and it would just be standard of care, but I just we were talking about this earlier. I just don't think we're there yet, and I think that we've seen multiple examples of this at our own institution. If patients are not labelled ERAS, then sometimes they won't quite get the same care, depending on the level of enthusiasm of the provider. When the enhanced recovery coordinators go on maternity leave, programs can fall apart. I think in the UK, when you took your eye off the ball for a little bit after implementation, and things drifted down. So whilst I think it's a lovely idea that it could just become standard of care, in reality, I think having the label of ERAS and really keeping the sort of pedal to the floor and keeping the enthusiasm up is still needed at the moment, and it's not quite there as standard of care, which is good for us at the American Society of Enhanced Recovery. There's a way to go. My question is that when I go and speak in the UK and about data, and they say, you've got electronic medical records, you must be able to get all the data you want.
Oh, my God.
And that's their honest question. And you think that when you don't know anything about electronic medical records, do you think they're ever going to be able to give us the data? Because the data's all there. They should be able to give us all the data that we want. But they don't. Is that ever going to happen? Or is that just a panacea that we're never going to achieve?
They're hoarding the data.
No, it is going to happen. And as I said, for me, it's a 900 building problem right now, 900 different IT environments that I'm trying to get data from. But we are succeeding, and we will succeed one place at a time. That's a good question for Saul, actually. We were just talking. One of the advantages of academic places is you're all under one EMR, and it's a little bit easier to start doing that kind of data pull.
I'm going to arabesque that invitation over to Sutton Murray, who works with us at Duke. And she told me not to because she has a headache. But Sutton...
and dessert.
and dessert, that's right.
Mostly the dessert. No, so, I feel like EMRs do make it a lot easier to capture data. But the biggest issue that we have is that we have data coming from so many places. And I don't know about everybody here. We're on Epic. And we kind of like to joke around that Epic is really just a fancy billing system.
Absolutely.
And I think you had mentioned it before. They're built very kind of siloed, and their different data models don't really talk to one another. So I feel like it's kind of a matter of getting them and getting these EHR systems to behave with different kind of platforms and actually getting them to kind of allow that data to be put together. Where I was before this, we had an enterprise-wide database, and that did make our lives a little bit easier. It was a late-binding database that pulled in things from multiple sources. The issue with that, it's very expensive, and it's really not doable for a lot of smaller institutions. So I think it's kind of just a matter of trying to find what works for your specific hospital, and in our case, we're getting there with our build, putting in SDEs to all this different stuff and kind of trying to find workarounds, but unfortunately, out of the box, it can be really, really difficult to get.
But we do have some dashboards that we built.
Yep. So I've been here for a year, and I think our programs have been up for 3, and we finally have dashboards that are auto-populating. But we face the same struggles, especially with outcomes data that's kind of being risk-adjusted and coming in from different places. So just kind of finding reliable methodologies for storing that and getting that back out in a reliable manner is difficult.
I want to bring Tony in, Tony Senegor, who I'm sure everyone knows Tony. He's a surgeon. Thanks for coming, Tony. And if you look back in the history of enhanced recovery, you go back to some of the early publications, Delaney and Senegor are there right at the beginning. So, Tony, you've been doing this since the last century. Why didn't we all just do it?
Not to date you, Tony.
It was my grandfather that actually did that. So for me, as I look at the discussion, so all these meetings are ERAS. I would submit there can only be one other alternative, and that's URAS, which is unenhanced recovery after surgery. Because, the challenge has been that not much of this, even though we meet and there's lots of meetings like this, it really hasn't trickled into the things that our trainees read. It hardly is it embedded in textbooks. You have to read review articles to get it. So it's really hard to go to one source and say this is really standard. So I'm intrigued since, almost everything is anesthesia's fault anyways. But
of course.
Of course.
Hello.
When, as a consumer of anesthesia services, it is amazing how eclectic the profession is within a similar group. And so you really begin to wonder, do you, and I submit we're probably equally or more eclectic
I was just going to say,
right?
come on, Stones.
Right? But you do wonder at some point the variability can't be tolerated anymore because the outcomes are so obvious with the data, right? So we can be moving around the margins about the new science, but a lot of the basic things are really pretty basic today. I mean, just fluid management, right?
Yeah.
You can be this far apart and be okay, but to be this far apart is really not acceptable. And there are any number of tools. Choose which one you want to use, but it's very hard because I did a month of anesthesia, so I'm almost board certified.
Oh, well, yeah.
Right? The challenge with that is you can hit a number that I ask you to hit, but it has nothing to do with physiology. So we need to really figure out how are we going to look at the physiology of the patient to be able to get that intraoperative care standardized. And
Tony, are you all teaching it in medical school here and nursing school?
Not even close.
Because that has happened in the UK.
Yeah,
so my son qualified relatively recently as a doctor, and they don't call it enhanced recovery. He's only learned about those principles. Yeah,
I would tell you in general surgery, because of all the changes that we've had with the work hour restrictions, the biggest victim of that is the perioperative assessment of the surgical patient. It really has moved to mostly a technical exercise, which is important, arguably, but to really be a surgeon, it's really both components. But because we've stripped out the contact hours, the default has been to the technical side. So we're losing a lot of this legacy knowledge in general surgery, so I'm not sure who's going to pick it up. Hopefully your trainees will, because we have a challenge in surgery.
Yeah. Do we have a question in there? It's really hard to kind of see here. Oh, Attila. Yes, Attila Kett, another friend of the EBPOM family you'll hear this weekend.
Yeah, so we talked about that, how important is collecting major morbidity, mortality data, process measures. My question is more regarding what I consider one of the most important data is the patient-related outcome measures, and how do you propose to collect those? What tools you suggest to collect those? What are you guys doing right now?
So collecting patient-reported outcomes.
Yeah, so with the advantage of my cool job and lots of resources, we stuck our toes in the water on this. And starting about a year ago, we've actually sent every patient a survey at 6 weeks post-op. And it's very crude. We kind of whipped it up on the back of an envelope with our vendor. But it's called the Global Surgical Outcomes Survey. And it asks the patient to respond to some very specific questions. How long did you take pain medicine for? Did you have any major complications after your surgery? Are you able to complete activities of life? And it lists a couple of them. And then the most important one, which came up this afternoon, is would you have had this operation again? That concept of surgical regret is a very interesting one that I think there's a lot of work to be done in that area. I asked Tim what his guess on our number was on that. We have tens of thousands of these surveys returned at this point, and all comers, all surgical operations, C-sections, cataracts, knee replacements, the whole works, 6 weeks after, 75% of patients would have the operation again. Which begs a really big question about the 25% who wouldn't have the operation again and what's going on there. And I think we have a lot to learn in that area.
What's your response rate?
Response rate?
Response rate on that's about 20% right now.
So better than average.
It's a very large sample. I have no idea what all the biases in it are. I am certain that the first thing we really need to do with the data is split it by different surgical types, right? Because a cataract is really very different from a knee replacement, especially 6 weeks after. But as I say, we're just getting our toes in the water. It's a relatively unvalidated tool. So we have a lot to do, but I think that's going to be a huge area going forward.
So we use a tool, we use technology for this very purpose and have more like an ongoing conversation with the patient. So that's way we're able to get our response rate. I think right now it's about 63%. So like it's really high and it's very quick data. So the patients enter data immediately through a smartphone and it's actionable. So if they have pain, it's the pain is more, the narcotic use is more, etc. We can respond. So I think that's important to not just collect that data, but really make it real-time actionable.
Yeah, start to operationalize it, no question. The best thing I heard this afternoon was talking about the app for childbirth, mm-hmm. right? That starts a few weeks before delivery and goes through the delivery process and right after. Because those surveys should not be one-off events. They should be part of an ongoing discussion with the patient and engagement with them throughout the arc of care. And I'm trying very hard to build some models of that in our business because I really think that's where the future of good practice is.
Philosophic point, I guess, question. Data driving information, driving best practice, and data being as encompassing as not just collecting our metrics through a medical record, but also patient reported, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. And we all are all smart. We're all motivated to do the right thing. And yet, as Tony pointed out, we just aren't doing it very effectively. On the continuum of these 6 words that are just embedded in anyone's mind, total cost of care and two-sided risk on an external sort of pressure versus our intrinsic desire to do the right thing for the right reasons in the right way. How do you balance those? How do you reconcile those? How do you proportionately weight those as levers of change?
It's a very interesting question. I think there's no question that we, physicians, nurses, the healthcare community, have to have some skin in the game. So I think there's a great benefit of two-way risk models to drive good care, to drive innovation, and to really empower us and incentivize us to do the right thing. The flip side of that, and it happened in the United States in the 90s, right? We went through a huge wave of everybody's going to be in an HMO and it's all going to be capitated care. That really failed spectacularly in the US in the 90s because the public very rapidly got the idea, they're going to cut corners on my care to make money, right? And that's what's going through the public's head. So I strongly agree with incentivizing care and giving us financial incentives to do the right thing, but you have to balance that with a transparent, quality programs so that you can show the public the data that says your care is not just cheaper, it's not just more efficient, it's better. That's the trick this time around.
So we're coming up to the last few minutes. If anyone else wants to make a comment or a question.
Yeah.
Anyone burning? Here we go, sir, please.
Hi, Dan Engelman. I'm a cardiac surgeon from Massachusetts. I'm also the president of the ERAS Cardiac Society, which has started about 2 years ago, and represent the cardiac surgeons of the world in getting this going. So we're a little behind, but we're catching up rapidly, and we're just about to release our guidelines. But that said, I have a couple points from start to finish. First of all, I agree with everything that everybody said, and it totally relates to cardiac surgery. Most cardiac surgeons do not know what ERAS stands for, so
No idea.
I have a lot of work to do. But that said, 2 years ago, I didn't know what it meant, so we've been rocket speed. So that said, a couple comments. Starting from what you've been talking about. Let's go right to patient-reported outcome measures. We use one of these apps that one of you was mentioned, and it starts absolutely the minute you're booked for surgery. You meet your surgeon on your phone, you see his picture, you hear about him, and you're engaged from the start. It goes all the way through your carb loading, your NPO, your stopping your Plavix, everything about your meds, every problem you have, pain, post-op, real time, I have pain, come to my room. My nurse doesn't talk to me. And we also have focus questions which mimic but are not exactly the same as the HCAP questions. So it can help improve your outcomes, just let you know.
Yep.
And one thing we learned from it is the last thing the patient saw is what they think about their entire hospitalization. If you applaud them, shake their hand on the way out the door, they love you. If the last thing they heard was you forcing them out before 11 a.m. because you need the bed, they hate you. Doesn't matter that you did 2 weeks of surgery. That's that take-home message. How do you change behavior? How do you make surgeons or a team, how do you engage your advanced practitioners, data, and engagement? You give them something to present. You have them come to a meeting like this, present their data, and next thing you know, they're going to go home and be your leader. So it's sort of, it's not paying them more, it's giving them the data and the power to present it and be the leaders. Those are my 2 cents, and
Monty
I
has a
appreciate
question.
it. Thank you.
Can I ask you a question? Is enhanced recovery for cardiac surgery very different or remarkably similar to everything else?
It's identical. We have, the tiny little tweaks we have compared to your guidelines are, having just written mine, I could practically copy what everybody else in this room's already sort of written, and we have very, very subtle little differences specific to the cardiac surgery procedure, you know.
And how important is it to get them out of bed and get them going early?
Essential. And we used our patient-reported outcome measures. We're about to publish our first multi-site where we actually can compare what different institutions who have the exact same operation and the exact same questions asked of the patients, what the patients report of when they got out of bed, what's their pain level, what's their anxiety, and we could see that Hospital X does it better than Hospital Y, and now we multi-site, get on the phone once a week and go, how do you do it? And they go, well, we have a little board, we move a little magnet across, and I'm like, what a great cheap idea. We share best practice, and then we can in real time see if we can move it. So yes, absolutely. It's all the same. It's the same stuff.
So sitting out of bed having breakfast is success, and not sitting out of bed having breakfast is
failure. Next morning on rounds, I want to see him out of bed having breakfast. Yeah. Absolutely. But in the old days, it was Swan. We can't get out of bed. He's a Swan. But it's crazy. Don't get me started.
Don't get me started.
Because all of us here are so very passionate about it, because if you're sticking with us right now, you are passionate about improving perioperative care and enhanced recovery and all those things that we do. So I want to thank you guys. Thanks to Rick. Thank you so much for sitting down with us. And the EBPOM team and everyone that's supported us. Thank you so much. And thank you guys here live in Dallas, Texas at the Pegasus Room at Magnolia Hotel for the third EBPOM Perioperative Practicum Masterclass. There is a Twitter, we're blowing up Twitter with EBPOM right now. So go on there and join us on social media, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook. It's all great. Getting the conversation out there about what we're doing, because some of these conversations the rest of the world are hearing and they need to hear, right? That's our mission. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us. We'll see you bright and early tomorrow morning. Cheers. Thank you.
Top Med Talk. Nate Majerison here. Thanks for listening to Top Med Talk. Now, before we let you go, it's important that we remind you to subscribe to Top Med Talk. That way you'll never, ever miss another episode. Also, if we could encourage you to join us on social media, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, pretty much every single social media platform, we're there. Join us. And finally, check out topmedtalk.com. If you go to our website, you can subscribe to email updates. That way we can always tell you where we're going to be, what we're going to be doing, and how you can join us. topmedtalk.com and click on the section marked email updates. Finally, Top Med Talk is proud to act as the broadcasting arm of EBPOM, Evidence-Based Perioperative Medicine. We'd love you to find out more about them as well. ebpom.org is their website. That's ebpom.org. And if you go to ebpom.org/meetings, you can find out about some of the wonderful meetings that we attend and cover across the year here on Top Med Talk. That's ebpom.org/meetings.